The train station was unusually quiet that morning, the usual hustle of commuters dulled by the overcast sky and the soft hum of an approaching storm. Amid the distant sound of arriving trains and overhead announcements, a young woman stood near the ticket booth, her arms wrapped protectively around a small child. Her eyes were fixed on the screen above the counter, lips trembling as she whispered to herself, trying to calculate if what remained in her purse could somehow stretch to cover the fare. The child tugged gently at her sleeve, unaware of the desperation playing out behind his mother's exhausted smile. She had told him they were going on a little adventure, that soon they'd be in a better place. What she didn't mention was that this better place was her sister's small apartment 2 cities away, their only option after losing the apartment they once called home. As she stepped up to the counter and asked for a one-way ticket, her heart sank when the total appeared. She reached into her purse, pulling out a few crumpled bills and coins. It wasn't enough, not even close. She turned to look around, hoping no one had noticed. Then she quietly whispered to the man behind her, "I'm sorry, I can't pay." She hadn't meant to say it aloud, but the words escaped her mouth before she could stop them. The stranger looked down at her, noticing the worn edges of her coat, the dark circles under her eyes, and the innocent child clinging tightly to her leg. He didn't respond right away. He simply stared, not with pity, but curiosity. His sleek, expensive suit and polished shoes contrasted starkly with her faded jeans and second-hand bag. He looked like he didn't belong there, and in a way, he didn't. Unbeknownst to her, the man she had just whispered to was none other than Ethan Grant, a tech entrepreneur and CEO of a billion-dollar company. Despite his wealth, Ethan had always chosen to keep a low profile. On that particular day, he had decided to take a train for the first time in years, needing to clear his head after finalizing a major acquisition that felt more hollow than triumphant. Ethan had built his empire from the ground up. He knew what it was like to struggle, not as a single mother, but as a fatherless teen raised by a working-class mom who did everything she could to keep food on the table. Her sacrifices had molded him. And now, watching this young woman in a similar situation struck a chord deep inside him. Without a word, Ethan turned to the ticket booth and handed the cashier his card. 2 tickets, he said calmly, to wherever she needs to go. The young mother's eyes widened in disbelief. "I can't accept that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan gave a small smile. "Then don't accept it for you. Accept it for your son." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked down at her boy. She nodded slowly, the lump in her throat making it impossible to speak. The cashier printed the tickets, and Ethan handed them to her along with a small envelope. "Don't open this until you're on the train," he said. The woman thanked him again and again, her gratitude pouring out like a river after a storm. As the train arrived, she boarded with her child, still overwhelmed by the stranger's generosity. Once seated, she opened the envelope. Inside was a simple note. "I see you. I've been where you are. This is not charity, it's a bridge. Walk across it, and don't look back, e.g." Alongside the note was a check. Her hand trembled as she saw the amount, enough to rent a place, find a job, and start anew. She broke down in tears. Meanwhile, back on the platform, Ethan watched the train disappear into the horizon. For the first time in weeks, he felt peace. In that moment, helping someone in need meant more to him than any business deal ever had. Weeks passed. The young woman, whose name was Clara, found herself in a new city, living with her sister temporarily while using the money to get her life in order. She applied for jobs, enrolled her son in preschool, and eventually landed a part-time position as an assistant at a local community center. There, she began helping other single mothers like her, guiding them, connecting them to resources, and offering them hope. The memory of that stranger at the train station stayed with her, his note tucked safely into her diary. Clara didn't squander the opportunity. She grew stronger. With time, she managed to save enough to rent a small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and her son's laughter filled it with more wealth than any mansion. One day, while sorting files at the center, her supervisor handed her a letter. It was from a major foundation offering a grant to expand their services. The signature at the bottom read, "Ethan Grant Foundation." Her heart stopped. That night, she wrote him a letter. She didn't expect him to respond. But to her surprise, he did, personally. They met again months later at the opening of a new women's support facility, funded by his foundation. This time, there was no desperation in her eyes, only strength and gratitude. She walked up to him, confident and calm, and said, "I never got to thank you properly." Ethan smiled. "You already did. by becoming the woman you were meant to be. From that point forward, they kept in touch. Not as benefactor and recipient, but as friends who had crossed paths at the perfect time. Ethan continued to support her initiatives, often attending her events quietly, always more interested in impact than recognition. Over time, their bond grew, built on trust, shared values, and quiet admiration. While neither of them expected it, a connection blossomed, not out of need, but mutual respect. Clara, now a beacon of hope for countless women, often looked back on that rainy day at the train station and smiled. That single moment, her whispered words, "I'm sorry, I can't pay," had unknowingly reached the heart of someone powerful. Not just in wealth, but in compassion. And Ethan, despite all his accomplishments, often told people that the best decision he ever made wasn't a merger or a stock buyout, it was buying a train ticket for a young mother he never expected to meet. In the end, their story wasn't just about kindness. It was about timing, about unseen battles, and about the quiet power of one human recognizing the struggle of another. One small act of compassion had created a ripple effect, changing not just 2 lives, but countless others. And as they stood side by side at the community gala 2 years later, her son now happily running around the room, full of joy and security, they both knew something simple yet profound. Sometimes, the people we're meant to meet in life don't arrive with grand gestures or fanfare. Sometimes, they arrive quietly, during moments when we are at our lowest, and remind us that we are seen, and that we matter. That is the power of compassion. And that is the beginning of a new story, one filled with hope, heart, and healing.